what you're seeing here is the starting place. We stripped all of the Tupperware off of the bike in order to get access completely to the valve covers and the top of the head. If you just want to check the valve clearance, you don't have to remove all this stuff, but to get the access that you need to actually do the adjustment and remove the cams, you do have to get it pretty well stripped down so you can get to it. Mostly you need to be able to see. So starting here, we're going to remove the spark plug wires. Get a wrench here and take these valve cover screws loose. I don't have a thing Fred to put parts in. You see any old newspaper or anything laying around over on the other side? Yeah, I could lay, yeah, that'll work.
There's a white plastic bag. It's probably pretty dusty. Some of that stuff there.
Nah, that'll work. We're not going to remove very many piece parts. Okay, these 4 screws here remove the cover. These 2 actually just hold this front cover onto the back, and if you're working like replacing a timing belt, you only have to remove the front part of this cover. We can get this gasket off here. Probably just going to have to leave it peeled up there. Okay, what you're looking at now are the 2 cams, intake and exhaust. This is the exhaust cam, this is the intake cam. We'll be measuring the clearances, which are actually, you can see here at my fingers, these 2 valves, these 2, these 2, and these 2. And to check the clearances, you've got to get the cam rotated around so that you're measuring at what you call the base circle, which is the smallest diameter on the cam. So, need to remove one more piece of hardware here before we start trying to measure this. In order to get this turned to the right place, we need to see where the crankshaft is. We want to get these cylinders into the firing position when we measure the clearances. So, okay, this is on the front of the timing cover, and what's here is a wheel that rotates with the engine, and it's got marks on it to tell you where the crankshaft is. They're called a T1 and a T4 mark. And I'm going to have to go back and look in the book again to see which one is for which bank of cylinders. All I can remember right now from what I read was you start with T1. There's a pointer right here that's molded into the edge of this opening, and this is what you use to align the marks to. And now we can find the marks, which are on that wheel somewhere. I believe I see them right there. It's going to be pretty hard to see those with the video camera because there's just no contrast. They're molded into the front of this black plastic. Okay, we're having to stop here and take the spark plugs out because trying to roll the motor over and get the marks to line up on that wheel, the place at which the marks want to line up is right where one of the cylinders comes up on top dead center, and the compression pushes it over to one side of the mark or the other, and we can't stop it exactly where we want to. Okay, with the plugs out, we found that the engine rolls over easy enough that we can actually turn it using the nut that's on the front of that pulley. And I'm going to ease it up here until we get this these cam marks to the spot where they're supposed to be. I believe I gotta go. One more revolution here. Okay. It looks like we're going to have to rotate this engine from valve to valve to get the cams exactly where they want them. What I've always done is when I get ready to measure one is to make sure you've got the lift part of the lobe up on the high part, and that means the bottom side of the cam. The base circle is against the lifter, and that's where you want to measure the clearance. So we're gonna get a feeler gauge here out of Peter Shim kit. I believe that it has come with both metric and okay, this one is marked in both English and metric, and this one is marked just in English, and these blades are a little bit smaller, and that's the one that I think I would like to use. So no, this is in millimeters. And I believe I'd rather go back to the one that's marked off in inches in English units. These things are supposed to be somewhere between, oh, let's see, this is the exhaust. This cam right here is the exhaust cam, and so all four of these valves are exhaust valves. 2 valves per cylinder, or two valves instead of one, just to get the necessary diameter they're looking at. Look at the clearance that they want when the valves are open. Okay, the exhaust valve is supposed to be between 9 and 11, and the intake's between 5 and 7, and so I'm going to shoot for mid-range to loose, which means 10 to 11 for the exhausts and 6 to 7 for the intakes. The reason being, as the engine wears, the valves tend to wear in the seats, and they seat deeper with time. And as they seat deeper in the head, they're upside down, they get closer and closer to the cam, so the gap tends to close up. So if you set them, you want to set them towards the larger of the tolerances, or maybe to the mid-range. Okay, let's do some measuring and see where we are. Okay, we got more than 5. Let's try for 9. We don't even have a good, well, yeah, we do. We've got 9 on that one. And we've got 9 on that one, and 9 is the bottom of the range. That's the minimum that they should be set. And now I'm going to crank the engine around some more here with this handy dandy little screw. And we're trying to get these 2 cam lobes back here where they are facing up like that. And we got the high part looking at us here, which means the low part is down next to the lifter, and we'll see what we got here. Be able to see. Okay, we've got a good 9 right there.
Now you're going in from the top or something this time.
Well, it's just I can just
optional on both.
Yeah, you can approach it from the top or the bottom, just whichever seems to be the easiest from an access standpoint. We got a good 9 on that one. and then a pretty good 9 on that one. So it looks like all 4 of these exhaust valves are set at about 9 thousandths. That's the bottom of the range, and I guess based on what kind of shims are in the shim kit and what kind of shims are in the bike, I may choose to bump those up about 1/1000th of an inch or maybe 2. So what we need to do, Fred, is to get some pencil and some paper and write down what clearances that we're measuring in order to know what we want to do when we take the valve, the cams off, and actually get in there and see. Paper recorded what we had on the exhaust valves, and now we're going to roll around here and put the lobes up on this first cylinder for the intakes and measure them, and they're supposed to be 5 to 7. And we're going to take a look here at 5 and see if we can get a.
Show me those lobes. Point to those lobes up, Bob. Okay,
right here.
I see them.
Do you need my flashlight to get a better shot?
I got
okay.
it.
I'm not able to get a 5. You know, one of the problems you have with feeler gauges is the thinner they get, the more flimsy they get. And it's really hard to get enough pressure on it to push it in there. I might say a word about the feel of these things. If it just slides in there, and there's no friction at all on the blade when you've got it stuck in here between the cam and the lifter, and you can just slide it in and out and in and out. That's not the right gauge. You need to go one thicker. The one that's right is one where you have to exert a little bit of force and maybe wiggle it a little from side to side to get it in there between the cam lobe and the lifter. You don't have any fear of pushing the valve open, you know, just doing this with your fingers. If you can get it in there at all, I think that you can be, you know, pretty much assured that that's about what the clearance is. But you definitely don't want the case where it just slides in and out and there's no friction on it at all. That means you don't have a thick enough blade yet. That's what I've got here. When I try to run a 4 in there, 4 just runs in with no friction on it whatsoever. But I'm having a hard time getting the 5 in there, and I don't know whether it's just because of the flimsiness of the blade or whether the clearance is actually somewhere between 4 and 5. My guess is that it probably is something in the neighborhood of maybe 4 and 3/4 or so. But I'm having a hard time getting a 5 blade to go in there at all, so I'm going to call it a loose 4, which means that's a little bit below the minimum clearance, and so we want to do something to that. And I'm just going to write down 4 plus here as a setting. And now we're going to crank the motor around a little bit more and get.
Now you're not looking at any marks.
No, I'm not looking at the marks. I'm just watching the cams for this part.
Is there some other part of the procedure
yeah,
where
when
you
we
have
get
to
ready,
look at the marks?
when we get ready to take the cams out, we're going to have to look at the marks.
Okay.
So I'll roll this one around now until I've got the lobes up at the top, and we'll measure the other 2 intake valves on this side and see what we got there.
Really not able to get a good shot of what you're doing.
Well, come around to the other side. And,
I don't know if it would help any, but
yeah, I think we can get it. There's plenty of visibility on this one. What we're going to get right in here. Can you see
Oh,
this
yeah.
area here between the, this is the bucket as it's called, which is sitting on top of the valve stem, and then this is the cam lobe, and what we're measuring is the gap between this bucket, right in here, between that and the cam lobe. And we're trying to get this feeler gauge stuck in there.
That's good.
And this is another case where I can't get it pushed in there. And we'll try. Now this one goes with
Good Lord.
with no problem at all. And this is a 5. So we'll go to 6 and see how the 6 will work. This one may be one we don't have to adjust. Oops. Lost it. Yep, 6 slides in there. Just about right. So we're going to leave that one alone. Thank goodness we got one. We got one on this side. That one's 4 plus, and that one's 6. And it will be satisfactory, I think. Fred, I probably ought to mark on that what. This is the right side, and this is the front. And what that means is that this is cylinder number 3 back here, and this is number 1 up here.
Okay.
And over on the other side of the bike, then we're going to have 2 and 4. So these are our clearances. This is the cylinder number. This is the intake up here, and these are exhausts down here.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now I need to read a little bit. Turn that off. Timing case cover off here in order to be able to see where we are. The manual says that we should do that. There's 3 screws holding it on.
Well, now, distinguish between looking at these marks and looking at those marks.
Well, they'll all line up. Everything will line up when it's right. And it's just kind of a double check.
Okay. Not different.
Since the cams are driven at half the crank speed, 2 revolutions of the crankshaft is 1 turn of the cam, and so you got to figure out which revolution of the crank, okay, puts the cams in the right place, and that is unique
I see.
to this mark right here. Okay, we're going to go back here now and try to get the T1 mark in this little hole lined up with the, and see if that puts us in the right position up here at the top. Limit before. There's 2 sets of marks on this wheel. It's what they call a T1 mark and a T4. That's definitely the one right there.
And say again what you just set.
Well, we're checking here to set the T1 mark at this pointer because we're working on the right-hand cylinder bank. If we're working on the left hand, we'd be setting the T4. And we're going to come out here and see if we've got the cam in the right place. Now we got to do some searching here. I believe that we do not. Let's see what the book says here. The T1 mark in the correct position down here, and now we're checking here this pointer, which is you can just barely see here on the edge of the case, and this mark right here on this cam. There's a notch right there on that tooth, if I'm not, yeah. And we're checking to make sure that those 2 that those two things are lined up. It's possible to have this mark actually over here 180 degrees out. And if that was the case, we'd need to rotate the crankshaft one more revolution, and that would bring it around, since this wheel turns at half the speed of the crankshaft. So it's in the position now that Honda says to use to remove the cams, and that's what we're going to do next. We got to get to the shim buckets. Before we remove the cams and start getting loose pieces in the head, we got to do something that is just of a precautionary nature, and that's to plug all these holes that go either into the cylinder or into the crankcase with some paper towels, so that if we drop something, it doesn't go down in the bottom of the motor or in on top of the piston.
Hello, what is this? This bike has not been ridden enough lately. That's clear.
Okay, what we're going to do now are just some precautionary measures. We're going to block some of these holes that go down into that's where the spark plugs live, and at the bottom of that there's a hole that goes right into the top of the cylinder where the spark plug screws in. We don't want to drop anything in there. And this is an oil drain hole right here. It goes down all the way back down into the engine crankcase, and we sure don't want to drop anything down in it. And I don't know whether there's a bolt everywhere else, I think. I don't think I see any more places where we're likely to drop anything. So the next thing we want to do, and this is, I don't think is anything that is in the manuals, it's just something that has been recommended by some of the listers over the time, is to mark the actual area here, the teeth, where these cam gears engage with the gear that drives them. And that will help us in getting the cams back in there in the proper place. If you look at the front of these cams, you notice there's two sets of gears here. There's a front gear, and then there's a gear behind it, and these are spring loaded relative to each other, so that they put a counter opposing force onto this gear, so that there's no end play in the cam. It's always firmly in contact with this, and when we lift the cam out, these gears are gonna move just a tad with respect to each other. So we're gonna mark a couple of things. I got some acetone here, but any kind of good solvent will work. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the grease off of the top of those teeth right there, and I'm going to get the grease off of this one. And all this is for is to put a mark on here, so when we put these back together, we make sure that we've got these teeth lined up with each other. I don't know whether it's possible to get one tooth off or not, but we don't want to. Okay, so let's put, oh yeah, that's going to show up. That's going to show up well enough. Okay, now that'll take care of us relative to getting those two lined up. Now we need to go
to
down.
each other, you mean?
Yeah, to each other. See, it's going to rotate. The spring is going to cause this to rotate. I don't know whether it can rotate more than a tooth off or not, but since the back gear is the one that I'm going to mark relative to the driven gear, if it rotates, I want to know it. So we're going to clean off a spot right there where those two gears mesh, and we're going to clean off a spot on the bottom cam where those two mesh. right down here.
Almost get in there, but not quite. Yeah.
And then we're going to put some marks on here, and hopefully we got enough grease off. And I don't know whether we do or not. There's another Q-tip. Yeah, let's go one more round on that one. It appeared to be.
You're supposed to say Q-tip, and I'm supposed to hand it to you.
Oh.
As in the operating room.
Operating room. That little thing is in the damn way.
Do I need to hold it?
Well,
We got a little use of that one word got us to PG-13.
what's that?
Damned.
Oh.
I doubt if we can make it to R.
Oh. Okay, we put a couple of marks down here, and I don't know whether you can see well enough. It's a red pencil or a red magic marker, not my choice of color, but it's the only I could find, to mark the two teeth that mesh there, and also to mark the two teeth
I believe I just got it.
that mesh down there. And there's one more thing. I'm going to mark a red mark right there and a red mark right there that line up with these teeth. And so surely with all of those marks we're going to be able to get it back right. The one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark these four center bolts with red because they are shorter on some motorcycles, and I don't remember whether this is one of the ones or not. Won't know till we take them out. They are shorter than the four outside bolts, and if you get them in the wrong holes and put the long holes in the short threads, you can twist the bolt off before you get it tight, just thinking that maybe there's some friction in the thread. So it's kind of important to get these bolts back in the hole that they came out of. And so now we're going to start removing these cams. If you'll notice, this cover's marked with an I. That's the intake. This one is marked with an E. This is the cover for the exhaust. These front caps are also marked E for exhaust. Well, now they're both marked the same. They're marked I and E. This looks like the same part number, so it does matter after you have some wear on the bike, whether you put these back, in the same place or not. So we want to be careful and get these back in the same position. So I'm going to put a U on this one for upper, and we'll put an L on this one for lower, just to make sure that we don't get those mixed up. And now we're going to remove these. Remove these cams, and the only thing to keep in mind when you do that is that there may be a little bit of pressure on some of the cam lobes, tending to the valve spring pressure tending to move this cam slightly up out of its bearing. So it's important when you remove these to just loosen them all evenly and continue to do that. As you take the cam out, and we got them all broken loose now, and we're just going to give it like a quarter of a turn, quarter of a turn, quarter of a turn.
So this
quarter of a turn.
exhaust one is going to come off by itself without doing anything
Yes.
up here?
Yes. Okay, it looks like we've got a good position on the cam because nothing is tending to want to jump up at us. So I guess we've got the lobes located at about the most zero. Well, there's a little bit of tension on that one. This may be the only one that has. Okay. We'll find out about the lengths of these bolts here in just a second. I'm going to put this light down.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got all the bolts loose now. We're going to start taking these out, and we'll look at these, and sure enough, there is a difference in length, and that's why you want to make sure that you get the shorter one back in the shorter holes, and they're going to be the 4 inside holes, and then all the others should be the same length. So we'll only have to pay attention to the 4 that have the red tops, and there's 2 per cam. Yeah, the red marks that we put on there. So we'll set these down somewhere out of the way, and we should be able to lift off this cam cover if we can find the appropriate tool to prise it with. Alright.
Why is there not some action happening there when you're trying to lift it? Is this gear going to turn as it lifts out of there, or?
Don't know.
There's something happened.
Okay.
Oh, about that. Oh, what was I talking about?
Well, I think
What's that part called?
it's just part of the
cam
mechanism that holds the cam in place. And here's
I thought the whole thing was going
front
to come
piece.
as reason I was. Oh, look at that, would you?
Here's this one.
How'd you know that little tap on the end is going to break it loose?
Well, it's just kind of like a main bearing cap on a motor, and that's kind of the way you get them out. So we're going to lift this thing out. If you notice, these did not move all that much. These two, they're not aligned anymore, but they're slightly, you know, off from each other. But we'll make sure we put them back together and get them lined up, because somebody on this ST list put his cams back in and forced this in the wrong direction and actually chipped a tooth off, and I think had to buy a new cam. So it's something to pay attention to. And this we need to put somewhere where it would stay relatively clean. And now we're ready to use another item out of the Shim kit that's in the purple box. You see the purple box anywhere, Fred? Maybe it's in the...
I think it's in
there. There it is.
Are you going to do the exhaust completely before you move?
I'm going to take a look, in the exhaust. We won't put it back before we do the intake, but we're going to go ahead and...
I'm talking about the shim part.
Yeah.
If you have to change the shim, you're going to do that now?
No, I'm just going to look at what shims are there. This little suction cup that's in the kit is for the purpose of grabbing these buckets and pulling them out.
Oh my gosh.
And you're either going to find the shim in the top of the bucket, which is where it is in this one, or the shim is going to stay on the top of the valve. What you want to do is make sure that you don't, drop it. You want to make sure that you've got it. And we're going to take these out and set them down here in the order that they come out. Okay, that one is in the bucket. That one is in the bucket. It's just stuck up there. Oops, you can break it loose with your finger. And this one. It too stayed with the bucket. So there are the 4 exhaust ones. We're gonna.
This is, I would say, this is serious, high-level shade tree work we are doing here. Probably the most impressive shade tree work I've ever seen.
All right, now we're gonna take the top cam loose if we can find the right tool.
This is a repeat of...
Needless to say, the cams are different. You don't want to get them swapped with each other either. So we'll try to keep them straight. I don't know whether, I'm sure they're marked somewhere, but I'm not sure I want to go to the time to try to figure out how they're marked or where they're marked. I think it would be easier just to take the extension out to do that one.
Looks like you're about to run out of space on top of this white box to put stuff in. The big old thing, something.
Oh, yeah. Interestingly enough, this little appendage right here, this is an oil passage, and when the engine's running, oil squirting up through here and along this gallery and then coming in through these holes in the top to lubricate the cam. I guess turn it off, Fred, and we'll shut the cam off. We gotta, I guess the next thing we'll do is go in there and look at the shim values that we have. They're all stamped, but I suppose it's possible with wear for the markings to wear off of them, but none of the ones in the kit seem to have lost their marks, and I'm sure some of them, you know, have come out of somebody's bike. A new sheet here. Okay, you ready? Okay, we've got the other intake cam off, and we've removed the 4 buckets there, and we've got them all sitting here upside down, and the next thing we're going to do is to take the shims out of these buckets and record what values that we have. So I think we'll just duplicate what the inside of the head looks like, and we're going to write shim values in each one of these circles. So we'll start with this first one right here, and I may have to get you to help me read these, Fred, but that looks, is that 215?
Yep.
Okay.
215.
So
it was a little bit worn too, looked to me like.
Alright.
So why are these what units are these measurements, by the way?
These are in that's 2.22 millimeters.
Oh, 2.22. Okay.
Yeah. I believe that's the way they're
Oh.
marked.
And the reason they are
Different
is
manufacturing
tolerances?
tolerance is right on the valve length,
How interesting.
on the base circle of the cam, and and wear. There's a 2. Look at that one. I think that one's a 228.
Yeah.
Some big ones.
Sure would go down into one of those holes really easy with that you put.
Oh, that we put the toilet paper in. Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that it's happened before. And I mean, it's just a disaster, because if it goes down a spark plug hole, you'd have to pull the head off. If it went down a crankcase, that wouldn't be so bad. You just need to find a replacement for it. Well, this one's worn to the point where I don't believe I'm going to be able to find anything. Take a look. We're going to have to measure that one, and that's why the shim kit has micrometers in it. Okay, for the shim that we not quite sure what the last digit is, we're going to use one of the micrometers that's in this kit. This is, I guess, is Peter's micrometer. It's a metric micrometer. We just checked it here with a known shim thickness of 222 to make sure that we had the right value. And if you notice, we've got two marks visible here past the 0. That's the first 2, and then here's 20, 21, 22. So that one is a 222, and the one that we're not quite sure what it is, we're going to put it in here and give her a twist and see what we wind up with. Looks like it's a 217 or maybe 218. Is that what you thought it was,
Either 210
Fred?
or 218 is what
I
I thought.
think the 218s will measure 2175. I believe I believe John O.
Good Lord.
discovered that the half sizes go to the next. This one is reading 2175, so we're going to call it a 218 for purposes of what we're doing.
Go.
Okay, what we're going to do here now is put with the shim size information we have, and incidentally, lots of folks after they do this once will keep a permanent record of what these values are, because that way you can measure the adjustment and know if you need to change your shim, you know what size that you need. And you know, with that, I mean, if there's not one in the kit, or if you don't know one, somebody's got one that size, you can, you could order it and have it before you ever started taking the bike apart. What we're going to do is we're going to put the clearances on here, and these are in thousandths. And the process is pretty simple. I'd like for this to be a 10. So what I would really like to have is a 221, because I need to make the gap bigger, so I need a thinner shim. I need a 227 here, a 217 here, and a 221 here.
ST1100 shim analysis, take 2.
Well, I didn't paint my bike another color. We've actually moved to a different location, and we're redoing something that we did in the original video. It was pointed out to us by Al Barth was in error, and he was certainly correct. What we did, and you saw part of it on there with the music and the sound. I was trying to subtract thousandths of an inch from millimeters and get millimeters, and that's not the way you do it. So we're gonna go through this shim calculation one more time, and this time hopefully we'll get it right. Okay, this is what we had when we started this process before. These are the current shim thicknesses that are in the bike, and they are in millimeters. Actually, decimal point's not on the shim, but this is where it belongs. So we've got a 215 here, a 210, a 210, and a 212, and we've got 4 thousandths plus, less than 5 but more than 4 here, 6 here, and the same situation here with the 4. The way I'm going to approach this is to put these thousandths of an inch into a millimeter correction, and that's what we didn't do before. So this is a 4 plus, and I wanted to add about 2 thousandths to that to give me a 6 plus to put us on the high side of the range. And here's what you do. There's 25.4 millimeters to an inch, and we want to know how many millimeters is a thousandth of an inch, so we multiply that out, and we come out with 0.0254 millimeters is equal to a thousandth of an inch. And for what we're doing and for the degree we can measure this thing, we're going to forget this 4 out here and say 0.025 millimeters is equal to a thousandth of an inch. So if I want 2 thousandths of an inch increase in my clearance, then I need to make a change here of 2 times that, or 0.05 millimeters. So this is the value we're going to be working with, rather than the 2 thousandths. It actually equates to about 0.05 millimeters. So if we come back on this page and I've got a 215, I want to subtract 0.05 from that, so this shim should be a 210. This one is okay. This is 6 thousandths. We're not going to do anything to that one. This 210, to change that by 0.05, I need to make this a 205. And this 212, to change it by 0.05, I need to make that a 205. 7. Same situation exists down here. This is 9. I'd like to get into the middle of the range, which would be adding or taking 1,000th away from each one of these, and 1,000th is 2.5. And so what we have to decide is, what are we going to do, because the shims come in 0.01 millimeter increments. So we have to decide if we want to change it 1,000th. We'd need to make a change by 2.5 here, 0.025. And so let's go ahead and round that off to 0.03, and that'll give us just slightly more than 1,000th of an inch change in our clearance. So we'd subtract 0.03 from each one of these, and we'd come up with our new values. Here would be 219, 225, 215, and 219.
And that's changing the clearance by approximately 1,000th?
Yeah, 0.025 would change it by 1,000.
Okay.
So 0.03 is going to change it by about 1,000th, and just a tad more. So these are going to be in the 0.10 plus range, which is okay. I believe the requirement is 9 to 11. So to get out in a mid range, would be out, you know, with a 1,000th plus change would be just a little bit to the loose side of mid range, which would be 0.10. Found one shim in the kit that would work, and we can shuffle some shims in the bike, and we can get all of the intakes in good shape. And I think, based on the fact that I would have to buy 4 shims and wait for them, I'm going to leave the 4 exhausts at 009, which is the bottom side of the clearance. I'd like to have a little bit more than that, but just for today, we're just going to leave it where it is. When you replace them, you put the shims in these little cups that are in the top of the valves. It'd pretty much be impossible to get the shim centered in this bucket well enough to ensure that when you put it back on, that it would go down in the place for it in the valve. So you just put it in there, and you can see now I've covered up that hole, and I'm getting ready to put this bucket back in there, and that'll be the end of that one.
Is that the bucket that came out?
Yes, it is. It's the one that came out of that hole, and that's important. We've got all the buckets and shims and everything back in there now, and what I'm getting ready to do now is just one of my old maid precautions, but I've wiped the tops of all of these buckets off, and now I'm gonna coat each one with some Mobile 1 here to make sure we don't put the cam back and it have a dry surface to rub against. This is the same red cap Mobile 1 that they use in the crankcase. Same thing, it gets pumped through here when the engine is running.
Are you using that now?
Huh? Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. I'm also doing this in the cam bearing area, although it looks pretty moist with oil from pulling the cam out, but it can't hurt. Okay, now we're ready to stick these cams back in here, and that may get to be exciting.
After you take out the paper.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, probably. This is the exhaust cam, which goes down at the bottom. This is the intake cam. Okay, now the secret here is to get the tooth that we've got the mark on engaged in in the right place here on this driven gear as we set this cam back down, and to get these teeth lined up. And if we do this right, it ought to all it ought to all happen kind of at once. I'm going to set that cam in there, and I'm going to see. I believe it's probably about a tooth off, but I'm going to, or two. I'm going to rotate it like that, and I'm going to take a look at it with my flashlight, wherever my flashlight is. I'm going to look in here and see what we got. And we are a tooth off. We're going to pick this cam up and rotate it one tooth. And now if you, whether you can see
yeah,
it.
I see it.
or
Well, I
not,
can see it. I don't know about the cam. Yeah.
But we've got our marks back together there. So this cam is, and when we pull it down tight, these marks should come back into alignment. So we're ready to put the top cap back on that one. And the only thing we need to do here is make a double check that we do have the intake one and not the exhaust. And we'll put a little mobile one here on that one to make sure we got him all slicked up. And we'll set that guy down. And if we had a soft nose hammer, we'd tap on it, but we don't, so we'll use this screwdriver. And
You can tell from the sound of the...
No, it's down as far as...
It's down.
The only thing important when you put these back on is this nose piece, this little gizmo, got to be pointing out, and I think that's probably common sense. You know, that makes the part number upright where you can read it too. Put a little mobile one in that guy, and put him down right here. Now we're going to find some screws. I believe these are the ones that came out of there. Find our two short ones and set them here so we don't screw up, and then we'll put these others in place. And we're going to run those all down hand tight, and then we'll start pulling them down in case there's any slight compression of the valve springs. We'll pull them down a little bit at a time till we get them all tight, and then we'll get a torque wrench out and torque them to the proper value. It's down a few turns or fractions of a turn at a time until all of these snug up tight, and then we'll get the torque wrench out, and this is just primarily not to put any undue stress on the cam. You just kind of go around in a circle, or you can crisscross. It doesn't make any difference. Just need to get them all pulled down evenly. Getting close now. Those foot pounds is how many inch pounds? 108? No. 9 foot 9 times, yeah, it's 12 inches to a foot, so it'd be 108 inch pounds. Okay, what we've got here is an inch pound torque wrench, a beam style, and we got our torque reading in foot pounds, and so it's 9 foot pounds, and if you multiply that by 12 to get inch pounds, it comes out to be 108. So we'll be shooting to get about 108 inch pounds of torque on each one of these bolts. I'm going to pull them to about 50, and then I'm going to go back and...
Is there an order that it recommends?
I don't think there is an order for it, but that's a good thought. I'm going to just start tightening. Since these are two separate pieces, if this was all one cast piece, it might be wise to start in the center and work your way to the ends. That's what you do on a cylinder head on an automobile. but it's just 4 screws, so we'll just tighten them down. We're gonna pull this thing to about 50 first. There's 50 on that one. 50 on that one. 50 on that one. 50. 50. 50. And what I like to do is just kind of get a wrench and kind of feel how tight these things really are. I'm tightening them a little bit now, but I'm certainly not exceeding the 108. But I just like to know about how tight they are. I always worry about twisting bolts off. Those feel just good and snug now. We'll go ahead now and take this up.
So 108?
It's 100.
100?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can read. Gotta look at the wrench here in some bright light and see what. Sure as heck don't want them to come out while you're running down the road. That would not be good. Okay, let me look at this thing in some bright light and see what these graduations are. Every graduation on here is 25. So 108 would be a third of the way between those two marks. I don't know how close I can get to that.
I always thought those torque wrenches, unless it was just me, seemed kind of crude or something.
Well, it's utter simplicity.
I know it's simplicity.
It's, you know, the good thing about an old beam style torque wrench is it doesn't ever need calibrating. If you got the style that clicks,
Really?
you never really know whether it's calibrated or not. I usually just check mine against a beam style by just pulling, you know, the wrenches against each other. And we'll let those sit there and stretch a little bit, and I'm going to go back and probably check them all one more time, and I'm just putting another thing of oil on there because that's been sitting a while and it's all run to the bottom. I'm going to pull this thing out here while it's easy to get to. We've got the exhaust cam sitting in here now, and got our red marks lined up with each other, and so we're going to repeat what we just did on the top one. Notice how these two now have come back into alignment.
Magic.
And they're misaligned like this when you start.
And I don't understand why torquing it down made them come back
because
in.
we're pushing the cam. It's not sitting in the bottom of this this thing right now.
Yeah.
It's being held out by the fact that this thing is twisted. So as we drive it down in there, it's kind of be like watching the minute hand on a watch, but you ought to be able to see these things rotate relative to each other and see that gap close up. Okay, here's the front one again, making sure we got the tab out.
Put your flashlight on this mark. I'm going to really get it good this time. Move it there. There's different. For some reason the red, that looks good. So now that's before torquing down the cam.
That's before we torque it down, right. And when we get through, you'll see that those marks have lined, those teeth have lined up with each other. I'll put some. I don't think that's even a. I don't think that's a bearing. That's just, interestingly enough, this thing right here just runs up in there, and I wonder what in the heck that's for. Okay, what we did while the camera was off was finish torquing in the exhaust cam, and then I went back, since we'd swapped shims up here on the intake side, I went back and measured each one of these as a double check to make sure that I had the clearances that I thought I had, and indeed I do. So we're ready to put the valve cover, or the head cover, back on. And the way this gasket is made, it's got 4 places that really anchor it into the top of the head, and there's two here and there's two in the front, and they're usually stuck pretty tight. And I'm leaving the gasket on the top of the head, and I'm going to try to put the cover on it. The trick is getting this groove in this gasket seal in this groove that runs around the head, and the hardest part of these two right here in the center where the spark plug holes are, which you can kind of put your finger down in there and, you know, and move it around a little bit. So we're going to give it a shot here. Let's see. Now, we had to back up just a little bit. I forgot that I had taken this timing cover plate off, and we're going to have to put it back on before we put the valve cover back on, because once we do, we can't get to it. Front timing cover on, and now we're ready to try to put this thing back down here. And if we're really lucky and we don't disturb this gasket as we set it down, it may set right down on there, and we'll be home free. Let's see how it goes. That's it.
How can you tell that?
Well, you look in here.
Well, I mean, I can see how you can tell the ends.
Well, you look at what kind of gap that you've got.
Okay, because of the ridge and the valley. If it's not ridge and valley,
if it's not seated,
it'll
be pretty
big gap.
Yeah, it'll be pretty obvious to you, that it isn't. But see, we can push that down essentially till the gap goes away, and the same thing's happening inside here.
Way to go.
So, pretty sure that I got it back in there right. Got that one started though. No, we don't.
This is straightforward here, so we're gonna terminate the video, I believe.
And down, we'll be through over here, and I'm gonna go around over onto the left side and start. Fred's about to run out of tape, and there's nothing different over there than over here, with the exception that the little wheel and the indicator that we're using up here on the front of the engine to set when we get ready to remove the cams, we used a T1 mark to remove the cams on the right side. When you do the ones on the left side, you want to make sure you use the T4 mark. It's just, there's two separate marks on there, and a T with two slashes and then a number. And if you got that, you're oops, I don't have that down for you. It's out up there. If you get the T4 mark set right, and check the mark up here on the cam wheel, and you can kind of look at the cams themselves and make sure you don't have any cam lobes that are pointing down trying to open a valve. Should be in good shape to do the left side.